Hey, welcome back once again. It's Tarot Tuesday. My name is Shannon Douglas, and today I'm gonna bridge a couple of gaps and a couple of interesting perspectives. One is I'm going to talk about tarot and science, and some of the science that we have around mind and meditation and contemplation, and I'm going to bring that into an ongoing journey with the major arcana. So I'm going to talk about the Chariot card. And you can't talk about the Chariot card or look at the meaning of the symbolism without getting into Plato's allegory of the Chariot. And so when we come back, we're gonna dive in. I promise some big names and some interesting memory techniques that you'll be able to take away with you, so that in your practice you can always remember what exactly the Chariot means. Hey, thanks for tuning in. My name is Shannon Douglas. This is the Chasing Quicksilver Tarot Tuesdays, and if you haven't subscribed already, take a moment to hit the subscribe button and the bell to get notifications. I put up a new tarot video every Tuesday. I'm working on some other projects where I'm going to fold in another larger narrative, and so you may want to make sure that you stick around and stay tuned for what's coming up. I'm gonna dive into a series I'm going to call something to the effect of magic words, and I'm going to explore some words and concepts around the esoteric and the mystical and the magical, and share some interesting philosophical, psychological, and scientific perspectives on the mystery traditions and the modern explorations that we all go through, especially if we're looking at tarot and we want to tie in other traditions to our stuff. So hit the subscribe button down below, and let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Chariot card. And before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about something that I found really interesting that happened about a year ago in the fourth debate between Dr. Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. Sam Harris, of course, is the famous atheist and neuroscientist, and in that argument, or that debate, they argued about the veracity of astrology. And Sam Harris takes a position, of course, that all of that is garbage because you're trying to predict the future. And Jordan Peterson defended that a little bit, saying, it was the precursor to chemistry, and alchemy was a precursor to astronomy. So the original astrologers were trying to figure out how the planets moved and trying to figure out how to predict those things better. And they pegged stories to the archetypes as they understood them, as a matter of memory techniques. Now, in that conversation, here's what I found really interesting. At one point, Dr. Peterson admonished the audience. He said, who here thinks that they're in control of their own mind and their own consciousness? And there was a few claps and some cheers from the audience. And Peterson said quite emphatically, you are not in control of the show. You think you are, but you're not. 99% of what you do, how you think, the emotions you feel, the decisions you make are driven by your unconscious mind. And so when we were looking at earlier archetypes of the tarot, we saw the magician and the priestess. And the magician in Jung's idea of the ego is the somatic aspect of the ego, and the priestess is the psychic aspect of the ego. And I'm going to do a whole other video on that shortly that I've been scripting out. So I want to be able to talk a little bit about the conscious and the unconscious mind here, the somatic experience and the psychic experience, and we really got into that when we looked at the Lovers card. Now I've done another video entirely. Actually, I've done several because the Lovers card of tarot, the number 6, is my favorite card in the deck. The masculine figure in the image represents the conscious mind. The feminine figure in the image, the Eve figure, represents the unconscious mind. The figure in behind them represents the higher self, or that aspirational or potentiality that we all have in our next stage of evolution and psychic and spiritual growth. And then we come to the Chariot. So the Chariot, we get into there's actually a bit of a parallel structure. So if you can see, you've got the figure of the archangel in behind Adam and Eve in the Lovers card, and you've got the charioteer driving the chariot in the number 7 card, as well as that polarity in the foreground. So it happens when we shift our perspective, our psychic awareness, our ego perspective, up and above where we currently are. We distance ourselves a little bit from the objects of the mind. Now, in that debate between Peterson and Harris, Harris affirmed what Peterson was saying about all of these unconscious forces driving us. And Harris said, in no uncertain terms, we're ruled by a committee in there. There's a committee in there somehow that governs our behavior, our choices, our feelings, our drives and responses to things that are unconscious. And Harris has long been a person who has meditated, and he takes a scientific approach to that. But nevertheless, when you're meditating, what you're doing is you're exploring the workings of the mind, the objects of subtle or psychic space, whatever kind of language you want to call it, and you're getting to know the kinds of thoughts and feelings and emotions that come up by removing yourself and viewing those thoughts and feelings and emotions as separate from you, the witness of your psyche. And very often we're so caught up in the associated experiences that we think that we identify with our thoughts and we identify with our feelings, and we think it's us. And from a meditative or contemplative perspective, we can actually remove our perception to an objective viewpoint, and we can look at thoughts arising, and we can look at feelings arising, and we look at memories arising. As a matter of fact, the yoga philosopher Patanjali, I'm never sure how to say that, described when you're in meditation that thoughts arise in your field of awareness like bubbles coming up from the mud in the bottom of a still pond and rising to the surface. And if you are meditating properly, you can allow those thoughts and objects of the mind to bubble up past you, and you can observe them without being attached to them, without associating with them, and without engaging with them. You can be objective about it. Now, here we come to the Chariot card and the story of Plato. So Plato used an allegory about the nature of the soul. And reason is what he named the driver of the chariot. That's our logical mind, our reasoning mind. And you know, the Hellenistic philosophers thought about reason and logic slightly differently than we do in the modern society, but nevertheless, he named this charioteer reason. And then he said, this chariot is driven by 2 horses. And the 2 horses are a black horse and a white horse, both winged. And the white horse, is our virtue. It's our potentialities. It is our higher nature, the higher order of our consciousness and our aspirations. And the black horse is kind of our temptations and our unruly nature and our desires that take us away from the things that are really important to us. Now, if you're old enough to remember the Fred Flintstones cartoons, or any other cartoons, because this happens frequently in the cartoon world, is we have a devil on one shoulder and we have an angel on the other. And that's often portrayed in movies and cartoons as this pull. What should we do? And in a more modern language that's rooted in what's called Gestalt therapy, we have internal parts. And we all have them, and we get linguistic or analog markers, they're called, that identify parts. Part of me wanted to put off making this video because I've had a long work day and I feel a little bit tired, and another part of me really wanted to get this done because I'm excited about these Tarot Tuesday videos that I'm doing. And so I had this bit of struggle internally, and we all have those kinds of struggles, and that's what the Chariot represents. So you can imagine in the upright position or the regular orientation of the card is having a consciousness, first of all, of what these parts are, and then having an awareness of these different influences that we have within our psyche. Now, the Plato and the Chariot card reduce this, and the cartoons about the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, reduce these parts to a binary, but they're really not. We have a part of us that's driven by physical needs, food, water, and it pays attention to safety. It's kind of the base of the Maslow's pyramid of needs. And we've got another part of us that's driven by our sexual drive and our passions. We've got another part of us that's driven by our will and our sense of confidence and drive and power. We have an altruistic part of ourself, or a spectrum that's altruistic, creative parts, insightful parts, and parts that connect us to the divine. So it's not just a binary of one or two. It really is like Sam Harris said, we are ruled by a committee in there. Now, if you've heard of this before, if this makes sense to you, I would love to get your feedback in the comments about how you became aware of these different parts, and maybe even, because there's some modalities of therapy out there where you can actually integrate conflicting internal parts through hypnotic induction and process. And I've been through a couple of these experiences, and they are so transformative and powerful. But the first thing that we have to do is we've got to tune in, and we've got to figure out what those parts are, figure out what the conflict is, and then there is a process for working through in actually a really fast therapeutic kind of reflection and contemplation that is transformative in our lives. And when we've got those two horses, or the angel and the devil, and one's trying to pull us in one direction and one's trying to pull us in another, that, if you can imagine, we have 100 units of energy to get where we're going. If we've got this thing inside of us that's pulling us apart or pulling us in different directions, we're losing speed, we're losing momentum, our energy's being divided, and we really, our whole energy system is drained by these kinds of internal conflicts. So the Chariot card is really, really important in terms of awareness, not just the awareness of that committee in there, like Sam Harris said, but the awareness that we can actually go through an internal mediation process. And I'll tell you a secret here. That internal mediation process is exactly the same kind of process that a mediation between two parties in the outside world go through, whether it's a business mediation, whether it's a divorce mediation, or a union and employer mediation. It's about finding out what the objectives of the parts are. And when you really drill down into it, they actually have the same intention. And that is to protect you, to protect your psyche, to protect the integrity of your soul, and actually help you in what Plato described as our journey towards heaven. So that's Tarot Tuesdays for today. I would love to get your feedback on this video. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell. I've got another couple of videos coming up, tarot related, but on a much bigger picture, a bigger scale. I think tarot is a set of really powerful and interesting tools. It's a discrete language that we can use in esoteric studies, but there are many, many other linguistic sets that we can incorporate or look at from a higher viewpoint. So I'll give you the example of tarot and astrology and numerology and Kabbalah, and there's shamanic practices, and there's Eastern practices like the philosophy of yoga, and Chinese practices and the meridians, and things like Reiki and Qigong and clairvoyance, and all of these different things that are mysterious and inspiring, and they make me curious, and they have for my whole life. So I'm looking forward to sharing those kinds of stories with you. That is Tarot Tuesday for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and tune back again in next week for another episode.